Welcome back to another episode of Broadcasting Seeds, where we explore the unexplored and delve deep into the unknown. Today, we have a truly captivating episode with two incredible guests who have spent decades uncovering the mysteries surrounding UFOs and the alien abduction phenomenon. First, we have Leslie Shaw, who spent 18 years as a journalist and now continues her work part-time in copy editing and page layout. Beyond her journalism career, she's a trained artist holding a bachelor's degree in experimental animation and ancient art history. She brings both her analytical and creative perspectives to our discussion today. Joining her is Stephen Shaw, a retired acupuncturist, Tai Chi instructor, and orchestral musician. Together, Leslie and Stephen have had a lifelong fascination with the UFO phenomenon, and they've experienced it firsthand. Not only are they UFO witnesses, but Stephen's psychic family has been affected by the alien abduction phenomenon for at least 3 generations. This personal connection and 20 years of research have culminated in their book, Who They Are and What They're Up To, which tackles some of the hardest questions surrounding UFOs. Their book isn't just another UFO story. It dives into the biggest mysteries. Who is flying these UFOs? Where are they coming from? And most importantly, why? Why are they here? Why are they interacting with humans? And why is our government seemingly involved? The book even delves into the chilling aspects of their alleged breeding programs. It's an absolute honor to have them with us today to discuss their research, experiences, and what they believe is really happening. Please help me in welcoming Leslie and Stephen Shaw to Broadcasting Seeds.
My name is Leslie Shaw. My husband is Stephen Shaw. We're the co-authors of the book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. I was a journalist for about 20 years, and I still work for the newspaper, but I'm semi-retired, and I just mostly do page layout and copy editing with the occasional story. And the So that gave me extra time to write a book, finally, which is what we did. And Stephen?
Yes, I'm a retired state licensed acupuncturist here in California for 20 years. I was also a Tai Chi teacher for 23 years. Studied multiple different martial arts. Did 6 years in the Navy, and been a lifetime musician on several different instruments. And we got together not because we were going to UFO conventions, but because of Tai Chi and acupuncture, and we got together about just almost 30 years ago now. So,
Yep.
and the whole thing kind of developed. Leslie's interest in the field because of tales I would tell her from time to time of weird things that had happened in my family for multiple generations, and things that had happening to me, and also my having seen 3 UFOs at that point in my life. Actually, yeah, 3 UFOs, and she was kind of a little bit jealous because she'd never seen a UFO.
I know. I wanted to see one.
Until we saw our first together, which she could tell you about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I was going to say, where was that, and when and where?
It was pretty life-changing for me, I can tell you. Stephen was telling me all these different stories about it, and I was believing him about 98%. But, there's always that little tiny doubt in your tickle in your mind, and then I saw my first one, and then after that, yes, I believed him 100% after that.
When and where, yeah.
Yeah, it was we were driving back home from 29 Palms to Yucca Valley going through Joshua Tree.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're at.
You know
I
where
was
we
in the
are.
Marine. I was in the Marine Corps,
Oh,
so
so you're you
yeah,
know
Guided duty on the base.
the
So
combat
two
center
different
too,
times.
yeah.
yeah. And so I was driving, and in the sky in front of us through the windshield, we saw this white light that was about half as bright as, I mean, sorry, about twice as bright as Venus. So it was pretty bright. And at first I thought it might be a plane flying into Palm Springs Airport, but it didn't behave like a plane. It was sort of hovering instead of, moving, and it was getting brighter and brighter. And it also didn't have those little running lights that planes have. It was just a circular round white light. And as we're staring at it, and it's getting bigger and brighter, about half as bright as the moon now, I would say, it took off at supersonic speed, full speed instantly, at probably going, my guess is always like 20,000 miles an hour. It was gone over the northern horizon in less than a quarter of a second. Just so fast, it visually streaked out into a line that, collapsed in on itself immediately.
Right.
And, a white light in the sky can be any number of things, but when it takes off at 20,000 miles an hour, then no, it can't be anything else. And that was kind of life changing, because being the writer in the family, I bore the burden of most of the typing and sentence structuring and stuff,
Right.
where Stephen had more of the scientific background, and I desperately needed his background to read.
But I do know how to write too.
And yeah,
Right.
he wrote his personal story in the book too, and but I really needed his help with the medical stuff for the human brain, and also
Right.
the geology. He has a lot more geology
Yeah.
than I do for the comet impact information, and so and
Right.
so that was we made a good team, so to speak.
Yeah. Right.
This was 2005 when you saw your first, right, Leslie?
Yes, it was January of 2005, and
It was about 9:30 at night, so it was dark.
so nearly 20 years ago, and that's about the moment I thought we better write a book now.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, Stephen, can you just give me a little bit about your personal
Mhm.
encounters and experiences?
Well, my first encounter, which is in the forward or the prep, was it the forward or the preface of the
The
book?
preface of the
The
book.
preface of the book. Yeah, my first, I grew up in a family that was post World War II England, that grew up in Manchester, northern England,
Yeah.
as children. And so they were getting bombed almost as heavily as London. Okay, so anyway, so my parents came over here in 1956. My dad was a Bobby in the, as a policeman for 4 years, and he was also in the RAF before that. So, anyways, I grew up in a family that we were told we had this family spirit guide called O'Glegley that would visit people and help people from time to time.
And communicate with all the women in the family were automatic writers.
Right, for 4 generations, not just my mom, but
Yeah.
her grandmother or my great grandmother. So anyway, so about the age of 3, I was being visited in the middle of the night in my bed by this two-legged invisible being that would like playfully jump on my stomach and my chest, wake me up and kind of just play. And it wasn't a cat. We didn't have a cat at the time. It wasn't a dog, that's for sure. So it would just occasionally just visit, and it was not non-menacing. I just accepted it. Maybe it's Soul Glegly, maybe it's the spirit guide. So when I fast forward to when I'm about 9 years old, I was sleeping in a bunk bed, and my brother, was 6 years younger than me, was on the bottom of the bunk bed. I was on the top, and I was awakened in the middle of the night by this weird sound I didn't recognize. I knew it was not the dog, and so I carefully climbed out of the bunk bed and started walking down the hallway, which was dimly lit, and my heart was pounding, and I was really kind of afraid of what I was going to see. I did not recognize the sound at all. It didn't sound human. It just sounded very odd.
Right.
And before I got to the end of the hallway, I just black out. And the next thing I remember is I wake up back in my bunk bed, tucked in, or just comfortable, and with no memory to this day of what happened in between those hours that went by. Have no clue. Now, about the age of 11 or 12, I saw my first UFO. And this again, this time it was around about 9 o'clock at night. Again, it was the winter time and it was dark. And I just happened to be looking out the front door, and there was this large orange globe that was moving horizontally at a fairly slow pace. And then it stopped, and then it continued going from south to north. I'm guessing it was maybe about 400 or 500 feet up in the air, and it wasn't going that fast, but it was consistent. And then it just disappeared. So I was so intrigued by it that I called Griffith Park Observatory the next day, and I talked to one of the astronomers over there, and they said, young man, we don't keep our telescopes pointed in that direction. We were like looking at galaxies and the moon or whatever. So that made sense. But it always stuck with me because it was nothing like a helicopter or an airplane, and its movements were just, the shape was wrong.
And no noise, right?
No noise, no noise. It was just odd. It was just like it stopped, kind of like looked at me, and this but continued on. So around before that, when I was about 6 or 7 years of age, I think about 7, I was awakened in the middle of the night, and I heard this noise, and I looked, I turned over in my bunk bed, and I saw these, what I call little garden gnomes, little men about a foot tall, but
Hmm.
they were kind of shimmery, and there were 4 or 5 of them, and it was just like I looked at them, and they were coming into the room, and I just like kind of got freaked out, and I turned over. It's just, I don't know what I'm seeing, but this isn't normal. So I kind of shoved that down for a while and didn't think about it until my brother Philip started sleeping in the closet. My brother Philip was 6 years younger than me, so when he turned about that age, about 6 years old, he started sleeping in the closet. And I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? He said, well, because I'm afraid of the little men that come at night. Now he was on the bottom of the bunk bed. I was on the top. So if he was going to be seeing these little,
Right. Easier access, right?
easier access, and he slept in the closet for 2 full years.
Wow.
And so he was very, very afraid. I asked him before he died, I asked him on a few occasions, said, can you talk about, your younger life? And he basically he says, I don't really remember. I just don't really remember, elementary school or much of my younger life. He just
Right.
didn't have any concept.
Hmm.
So things started to get very strange when I was 18. This affected the whole family. This affected the whole family over 2 different homes separated by 350 miles. And being as I was a cabinet maker, I forgot to mention I was a cabinet maker for the beginning of my life. My dad was a master cabinet maker, but we were also building a house in the woods in Sonora, California. So my mom, my brother were living up there. He was going to school, and my sister, dad, and I were working the business
Hmm.
in Fallbrook, in Woodland Hills. So the first night, apparently, my dad's closet door was open and closed on him. He came to breakfast in the morning and told me that his closet door was open and closed on him. And I just kind of, I'm 18 years of age, so I'm just kind of like, oh, sure, Dad, okay, maybe he had a dream.
Yeah, great. Great dad.
So he went out to work, right? So anyways, the next night, at that point, I had been starting studying Tai Chi and taking lessons, and I was also into Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings. So I was reading one of his books, and I just said, I think my dad might get a kick out of reading some of this stuff. So I gave the book to my dad and went back into my room. And half an hour later, he came back into my room, and he said, you know, I must be going crazy or something. I'm hearing a silver bell on the wall. I said, what? Where? He says, by the fireplace. So I went into the living room, and sure enough, there was this silver bell going ding, 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 just like a silver bell.
Hmm.
And we looked up the flue, and we said, well, let's get Karen. So I got my sister, who was 13 at this point, wanted to have nothing to do with all this weird stuff, right? So she immediately walked in the room. She said, where's that silver bell coming from? And said, it's coming from the wall. And so we banged on the wall. This isn't a 2x4 wall, right? It's not up the chimney or anything like that. It's right in the wall. And it just went on for a good 10 or 15 minutes. And we banged on the wall and tried to make sense out of it, and then just stopped. Now, every morning was what we would do. My mom would call, or my dad would call and say, how are things going in Sonora, and whatever chit chat. And my mom said to my dad, you know, funniest thing happened last night, Jeffrey. About 9 o'clock at night, I heard this bell, and I thought it was the phone. And I was sitting next to the phone. I picked up the phone, and there was this man's voice on the other end that said something to the effect of, "I am the invisible on Beachy," which could have been old likely
We
because
still don't know
we
what that
still don't
means.
know.
Right.
Still don't know. Well, I talked to my brother after that. My brother said, you know, Stephen, the phone didn't ring. I was in the room, but she picked up the phone and she was trying to have a conversation. This is happening at the exact same time that we're having the silver bell at our
Wow.
house, 350 miles south. Okay, so that was getting pretty weird, right? So we went back to work. So the next night, I was sleeping in my bunk bed, but on the bottom of the bunk bed, and I was awakened by a whizzing sound in the air, like a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, is that somebody like turning a fan on or something? And I kind of turned over and looked down the hallway. The kitchen light was on, so I could see down the hallway, and there was nothing there. So I just went back to bed, turned over, went back to bed. And then from the base of the bed, my bed was pushed gently twice. Push, push. And I thought, well, living in Southern California, well, maybe a little mini earthquake, you know, trying to
Yeah,
be
right,
logical,
right,
right?
right.
So then, of course, then I try to ignore it again, and then I get pushed harder, two again. And then finally, a third time, more intense. At this point, I'm thinking, is somebody playing a trick on me or what is going on? And then I get the tap right on my mid deltoid on my right arm because I sleep on my left side. I go tap, 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 just like somebody's index finger tapping you, just tap, tap, tap 3 times. And then I said, you know, I was getting annoyed and worried at this point. So I twirled over and I said, what? You know, and I was expecting to see something, right? I see this shimmery thing and it's like looking at me. It's there. I can tell there's something there. And then I black out. I told my dad and my sister, and, you know, we just went back to work. I was like getting really worried at this point. So the next night, I decided to not sleep in that bedroom. So I decided I'm going to sleep in my work clothes and just sleep on the couch in the living room. So that's what I did. So I woke about 5:30 in the morning, sleeping, you know, on my back, and looked at my piano, thinking about what music I was going to play that day. And I heard the little fountain in the other room, so I wasn't in sleep paralysis. I was awake. By the way, I don't get sleep paralysis. You know, some people wonder about that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a different thing. So anyway, so I was alert and awake, and from behind me, 25 feet behind me, was the front door, and there was this tall blue-white entity, about 6.5 feet tall, that I think noticed that I was awake, and it walked over to me in about a second and a half to 2 seconds, crossing the 25 feet, stopped by my right side. When it stopped by my right side, the whole right side of my body went completely numb or basically paralyzed. I
Mhm.
had my right eye open already, but I couldn't close it. Okay.
And it flooded the room with
And it
the
flooded,
same
it
light.
brought in with it this blue white beam.
Yeah.
It flooded the whole room with it with blue white light. And it bent down to my ear and it said, "Hi, Steve." Like, you know, inside in my ear, not inside my head. It was kind of like a whisper. I couldn't tell whether it was male or female. And I'm thinking all this time says, oh, I'm going to see old Glegley, the family spirit guide that I've heard that some people see from time to time. And, you know, but the other part of me, the logical side, is saying, dude, you are paralyzed. You can't move. You can't do anything. If you wanted to, you couldn't get up. And I'm straining to try and see the face of this entity. And I guess the entity picked up on that I was nervous or worried, and it only stayed there for about 5 seconds, and it stood back up, and then it took off and went back out the front door, and then I black out. Okay. So then at breakfast time, I tell my dad, and you know, we went to work again, and not knowing what the hell to think. So I just was still wearing the clothes I was wearing when I went to sleep, because you know we're guys and we're working, you know, so we're
Yeah.
not, you know, this is what guys do, right? This
Right.
and that, all right. So, anyways, 11 o'clock rolls around, 11 o'clock, 11:30. It's been 6 hours after I had this incident, right? So I said to Dad, no, let's go down to Jack in the Box and get us some food. So I reached in my right hand side pocket and I pulled out the coins that I had, you know, the change, you know, and I put them on the table. And swear to God, all the coins were magnetized. These are standard American coins.
Yeah, yeah.
pick up the coins by the edge, by the face. My dad could do the same thing too. It's supposed to be impossible. I've tried to replicate the thing, haven't been able to do it since then. So this is 1979, right? So we didn't immediately go and get our cell phone because it didn't exist,
Didn't
you know.
exist, right?
Right. So it's like we just thought, well, what else is going to happen? So the following night, which when everything finally finished after the last night, was when my dad saw this wall of blue white light outside of my bedroom, because our bedrooms were like separated by a hallway. And his being a former cop, he said, kind of like, what's all this then? I'm going to get up and see what's going on. He knew about the blue light because I told him about it. He couldn't understand where that blue light was enveloping the whole doorway. So as he was getting out of bed, this voice inside his head telepathically said, Jeffrey, just relax, go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. And that's exactly what he did.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here type
Wow.
of thing. Just relax. Everything's fine. Basically that was the message. Just go back. And he went back to sleep. He doesn't know what happened in between that.
Right.
Except when he got up in the morning.
These things seem to happen to the family in clusters. That was the weird cluster that happened to Stephen when he was 18. And then Philip had his own bizarre cluster of 3.
In 1982.
Yeah, a little later. He was at the Sonora house, and his bedroom window looked out over a creek, so there was a drop off, and then on the other side was a mountain with trees all over. So there's no road or houses back there.
Oh yeah.
And suddenly these 2 bright white lights are shining into his bedroom window, and it wakens him, and he sits up in bed and he's staring at these white lights, trying to figure out what they are. And the next thing he knows, he blacks out. And the family has a lot of these blackout instances where they'll see something bizarre, even terrifying, where their heart is pounding and they're freaked out, and yet they black out.
And then they black out. And then when you wake up, like when they wake up, or when you wake up, Stephen, or like your brother or whoever, when like, where do they wake up? Has there ever been any weird places, or is it always like back in bed or back on the couch or whatever?
I haven't. My brother and I didn't have that experience. I've heard some people do wake up in different locations.
Right.
I have heard that, but it hasn't happened. Has not happened to me.
Okay.
Oh, the last night was when.
Oh, and then then second night for Philip was he heard a scrabbling sound. He was laying in bed, about to go to bed, sleep, and he hears a scrabbling.
He was awakened, actually.
Oh, he was awakened by a scrabbling sound. I'm sorry. And he reached down to pet what he thought was the cat, and instead a hand grabbed his wrist.
Oh, man.
And he felt this thrill of adrenaline, and fear, and then but still blacked out immediately.
Blacked out. Gotcha.
And then the third night, he saw, this is the first time that we ever figured out what we were dealing with, because this is the first time a family member actually could remember seeing a tall gray alien in his room. Okay. That was the third night. He looked over at his doorway, and there's this 6-foot tall gray alien standing there looking at him. And again, there was just a moment where they're staring at each other and then blacked out again.
Boom.
And my brother was not somebody who was reading science fiction books or doing, he wasn't, we saw a couple Star Treks together and that kind of stuff.
The whole family were pretty no nonsense family.
Right. Seems like it.
This whole entity always was described to me always as about a tall, skinny, 6.5-foot being, frequently seen as like maybe a black man or a black being, sometimes a cat. Mine was the same thing, but it was blue white. And Phillips was a tall gray,
tall and skinny.
And other members, my uncle Doug, who also was in the RAF, just post World War II, his life was saved by this old Glegley character when he was in Sri Lanka, which was Ceylon at the time.
Yeah,
he was in a multi-man. He was billeted in a multi-man tent on a cot, and it was fairly jungle-like. And he recounted this incident a couple different times when I was in my youth, and he told me about that. Old Glegley had saved his life. He said that this tall, dark being just showed up and woke him up out of a dead sleep, And this time it happened to be wearing a red fez, he said. And he said, Douglas, you have to leave right now. If you don't leave, a raiding party's coming through and you will be killed, or you may be killed. Okay. So he knew about O'Glegley, the tales. He hadn't seen O'Glegley at that point yet, but he got out of bed and he got outside the tent, and sure enough, about a minute or two later, a raiding party came through and with machetes and some small arms, and killed a couple of the guys. Okay,
Ugh,
a couple of the
awful.
guys. So
Yeah.
the thing is, he believed this so much. He was married to my mother's older sister, so he was part of the Shaw family via
Mhm.
my aunt, right? So anyway, and he was a very wealthy man. He became very wealthy in escrow, and he was also, he also managed his money very well. But when he got his daughter her first car, which was a Triumph, a white Triumph, I always remember this because this was like in the early '70s. She got her first car, and the license plate was, guess what? Old Glegley.
Oh, Glegley.
Okay.
Yes,
Oh
that
my
was
gosh.
I
her
think he was
license plate.
grateful for being
Yeah,
rescued.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is something he just didn't like make up as a story. I mean,
Right.
I had heard this
Right.
about my grandmother seeing O'Glegley and
Now,
other.
so you said it now, is this the same entity, do you think?
We believe
But
Yes,
so.
just
Yeah.
presented differently to each of you?
yes,
Yes.
hmm
The
One.
same but different, right? Like just in
yes.
Yeah.
usually color wise,
Color
which
wise,
is
but the
The
size and
size
the
and shape.
shape,
It's
the
always
size
the
and the shape is
same.
the
Yeah.
same.
the same, but the
Yeah.
colors were different. Huh.
Yes,
Were
I
there
don't know
any
what.
other colors, or was it just the black, the blue, and the gray?
black, blue, and gray, as far as I know,
That's all
so
we
Okay.
far. I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
I never got a chance to talk to my great grandparents or I when I was like 7, I was in England for the summer. We never talked about Old that I can remember, but I certainly knew about it from my parents.
Now, what's O'Glegley's story? Do we know? Is there
O'Glegley is a
anything?
O'Glegley is a gray. We think that he's a handler
Okay.
for our bloodline.
Yes. What we
Okay.
discovered with our research, as soon as we started researching the abduction phenomenon, because we realized that's what was going on with Stephen. This blacking out thing after seeing something bizarre.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
not normal.
signature for the
Right.
abduction phenomenon, right?
And
So,
it's not so different than a lot of accounts too.
oh,
It's
most of
it's
them are like this. Yeah.
most of them.
A lot of
Very few
people would.
people ever
Yeah.
remember. Do you ever remember anything from any of them, of the encounters?
We tried to
Like
do a
maybe you
hypnosis,
woke
but
up or
Well, no, the encounters for me always happen from coming up from being asleep. Just waking up.
right.
Okay, so that's one commonality for me. Um, the interesting thing is that you probably are familiar with Luis Elizondo, right? Like
I
the
know.
ATIP guy, right?
Yep.
It's his book that just come out. Apparently, they have definitive proof now that people that say that are psychic, or
Yeah.
tend to be psychic, or that have can do remote viewing. It's called the parahippocampal gyrus. It's a part of the brain
Right.
that's larger. Okay, that seems to be larger in people that have, and
our
there is.
psychic,
We
people.
found that there is a psychic component that is affiliated with
The
these
UFO phenomenon.
the UFO
Yes.
phenomena. We call them our cousins. We don't call them aliens
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
of the way they behave, the way they act, and their interest. Okay, and
And we think
also
they are much more
generational.
closer relations to
Yeah,
us
they're
than.
generational. Contact. Like 4 generations in my
Yes.
family that I know of.
Well, that's
Okay,
one of the things I was going to say about when we started studying the abduction phenomenon. At the beginning, the theories were that the aliens are just curious about us, so they're taking a cross sampling of humanity just for some samples,
Yeah.
no big
Right.
deal.
research and development.
But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
turned out to not really be what was happening. What was happening instead was that as soon as they found a bloodline that they liked, that met their criteria of desire for whatever reason, they would start taking that person again and again and again and again through their lives, and then start taking their children and their grandchildren. So it tended to run in families. Like in Steve's family, we have this old Glegley character going 4 generations back.
From Germany through the Newman bloodline to the Roe bloodline in England to the Roe Shaw bloodline to California.
And
So yeah,
when automatic writers in the family or contact O'Glegley, he says he's been with the Shaw family for ever since
For a
the
long,
beginning of the Shaw family. So
right.
what we think happened was they discovered the Shaw the line and discovered that it had the criteria of genetics material that they wanted,
Mhm.
and they started preying on the family again and again and again through their whole lives. And so it and also when we started comparing UFO notes with UFO theories, nothing was making sense. It wasn't aligning. UFOs are seen 10,000 times per year,
Mhm.
every year
Reported,
worldwide,
reported.
and
That's
this is reported. And we think reporting is only about 10%. So
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
really seen 100,000 times a year, every
right.
year. Just the numbers alone are pointing to residency rather than
Yes.
interstellar travel or visiting here from distant star systems.
and they're almost always seen coming out of lakes or the ocean or sides of
Right,
mountains or
right. Yeah, which is huge. The under
Lots of reports of that. Where
Yes,
they come up
lots.
out of the ground rather than down from outer space.
Right.
And the Nordic aliens are essentially indistinguishable from human beings. They're Caucasian. They are white haired. They have
Mhm.
blue eyes or green eyes. They're very tall. They look kind of like Swedes, but you wouldn't look twice at one if they weren't wearing a spaceship and hauling you out of your bed at night or something, right? So,
Right, right.
um, but uh, and then Valiant Thor. Have you heard that story
I
about
haven't.
Valiant Thor? He was a man who landed a spaceship in a Virginia field in the 60s.
no, the 50s,
I'm sorry, the late 50s. You're right, late
the
50s.
mid 50s. Yeah.
And he got out of his spaceship and said, "Take me to your leader." And they took him to the Pentagon, and he essentially was there at the Pentagon, um, giving advice for like as a consultant for like 3 years.
Yep.
Now
To Eisenhower.
and he was a Caucasian, red-haired, white guy, a man,
There
right?
is one picture of him that does exist.
And he supposedly said he came from Venus. Now we know this is a lie, right?
Right.
What we think is that these cousins of ours, they reside in underground cities and underground bases here in the world on this planet,
Yep.
and are launching their UFOs from there. We think they've been playing gods for thousands of years, and now that we're too sophisticated to play gods anymore, they're playing space aliens. They're playing
Right.
anything to get us looking up instead of
Yeah.
down,
Right,
where
right.
we should be
And
looking.
you look at the time frame when they really started showing interest in this was around the mid part of World War II, when we were
Yeah,
toying
the
around
Foo
with
Fighters,
the Foo Fighters. And
Right.
so yeah, there was see the timing of things, like the
S-
Operation High Jump in
right?
1947. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, we're taking our whole fleet down there to, all of a sudden, right after the wars ended. This was
Yep.
planned like not long. It had to be planned not long after the end of World War II. So we
Right.
knew something. We thought that the Germans had a base down
Base
there.
Yeah,
down there, right?
because the Nazis were in the late 30s were showing this inexplicable interest in the Queen Maud Land coast, going up and down with their U-boats,
Yes.
and then finally, like one of the U-boat captains was quoted as saying, "I have found a paradise under the ice for our Führer or homeland," or something like that. And and so then Hitler started committing huge resources to the area, like engineers, mining equipment, personnel.
So let me ask you, I've asked this question to other people. So we bring up the Nordics, right?
Right?
Right.
So and I find it kind of I mean it's not funny, but it's ironic that what Hitler's view of the perfect human
Yep,
was basically a Nordic, right? So
exactly.
did they have contact? It's one of
We
those
believe
things like,
so. Yes,
and that
yes,
basically here's the deal. Here's this is, if you want to become like us, here's what you have to, one of those things.
yes. We're not sure where the white supremacy thing came from. Like, was it from the Nordics and
Right,
influenced Hitler, or was it Hitler's idea and he just kind of put it on the Nordics?
right.
We based part of our stuff too on Admiral Byrd's diary.
Right.
Yep.
You know, for me about when I turned about 30, 31, that was when I really started doing my research because things about old Glegley and other things were just not adding up to me. And for me,
Right. So we think they're coming from inside the earth, right? But
Correct.
is that where they're from? Or
Yes.
are they from somewhere else?
the
Well,
current iteration of them is
yeah.
from here.
Okay. So
Okay.
our theory,
Yeah, that's where I was
yeah,
going.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's always, this is what we believe that um, it's been recently discovered that the Younger Dryas comet struck what's now Lake Superior area in
mhm.
12,850 years ago. We think that the human race 13,000 years ago on the planet was a little more advanced than we give them credit for. And that the Younger Dryas incident was so severe and devastating that the evidence of these more advanced people were just wiped off the planet, just
Mhm.
scraped off the earth.
Apart
Some,
from 10,000 individuals, roughly.
yeah, so the surface population was reduced to about 10,000 individuals.
Yeah, maybe even less.
Right. So
Right.
whatever else this is a really good reason to recess underground, to move a population
Yeah.
underground and take your technology with you and your knowledge and your culture. That's why they're 13,000 years ahead of us because they didn't lose their technology. The rest of us poor schmucks on the surface, we were thrown back into the Stone Age, to start
Yeah.
over again.
Even farther in all
Yeah, I
actuality.
mean, right.
The,
Yeah.
the other thing we found too is that, of course, all these 1,200 different flood myths, almost all of them have this disembodied or this voice or this god giving them
Warning.
forewarning
Yeah.
that this cataclysm is going to occur.
Almost all of them have
So
that
they
in
had
the
to have
beginning.
foreknowledge so that they could either go
Yeah.
make an ark or go to high ground, or like in Diyarbakir, the Anatolian plains in Turkey,
Dig
to
in
to
underground.
dig in, a very
Yeah.
Yeah.
advanced 13-story deep city.
Place is
You know,
ridiculous.
right? It's like, but they all, place is ridiculous, yeah, and it communicates with other cities too that are like between 10 and 20 miles apart. So this was
Right.
a major undertaking
And
when you think
tools at
about
the
it.
very bottom of the place have been dated to like 12,000 years. So it's older than people give it credit for,
Right,
too.
it is.
It wasn't dug 4,000 years ago to hide from, for people to hide from
The Hittites.
the right, or so the
Right.
Mongols or somebody trying to invade. It was more like just to survive. We believe to survive this cataclysm that was this flood. So that means that 13,000 years ago there was somebody sitting on this rock who was able to spot a comet coming from far enough away to give people enough time to build an ark and build a city underground and move a population.
So we had advanced astronomy.
So somebody had advanced astronomy back then, and we know the ancient Sumerians had way more advanced astronomy than people realize. They actually knew about precession. It supposedly was rediscovered later by the Greeks, but the Sumerians knew about it, and they knew about the outer planets too. They knew about
Mhm.
Jupiter and and Neptune and
Now,
Uranus.
you bring up the Sumerians, but have you guys ever looked at any of the 12th planet, those
Oh
books like
yes,
that?
Oh,
Yeah.
Zechariah Sitchin, yes.
Yeah,
oh
Zachariah
yeah,
Sitchin books. I was just wondering if that has
absolutely.
come into your parted, like, put its parts on your theory as
That's the
well.
second part of the book. Yeah, we basically, as far as our book goes, yeah, that's is part of our book for
We
sure.
put a lot of stock in Sitchin's research.
Hmm. I
There's
mean, a lot of people do because it's
Yes,
pretty good.
and so we're talking about the Sumerians. If let's just say Sitchin's right? So the Anunnaki rather are running the advanced societies all around our planet, building pyramid structures and cities all around the world, supposedly looking for gold. And then there was the humans that are just kind of like they're slaves, still
Right.
relatively primitive, but supposedly the Anunnaki saw the comet coming, and the brother that hated us was going to let us all die, and the brother that created us, who liked us, supposedly uplifted humanity.
Is that Enki, right?
And that was
Enki,
Enki.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he supposedly warned us all. So we think, I mean, there's maybe some stock in this. And I also believe Sitchin's, uh, he surmises that the Sumerians built the Giza Plateau
Mhm.
structures in Egypt 10,000 years ago, and that makes a great deal of sense to us.
Yep.
That Robert Schoch's work on the wear patterns, the water wear patterns of the Sphinx point
Yep.
to much older.
And John Anthony West actually did that. Was like the
They were
inspiration for Shaw.
co-authors
Yeah.
for it, for their paper on that. And then
Yes.
also there's these sphinxes, these lion-headed sphinxes,
Mhm.
or lion-bodied sphinxes all over the plateau. And one thing the Anunnaki really liked to do was date things by procession.
Mhm.
So they would, if they were in the time of Leo, which was 10,000 years ago, they would put sphinxes all over the place, right? And so the Anunnaki, when they were in the time of Pisces, they depicted their gods as having fish tails. They didn't really have
Or the
fish
time,
tails.
or the time of Taurus, the bull.
Right. Or something.
Right.
They had bull,
Right.
bull heads or bull bodies or whatever. So they're really stamping the date on it when they're doing that. They're saying, oh, this is the procession time of, 26,000 year procession point, so
Right.
they're dating things by millennium rather than by, year, like we do,
Right. Exactly. Right. Right. So, okay. So we've got that. So let's get to the point where I ask the question, what do they want?
We think that they are, this is something that was into the diary. They said to Admiral Byrd that we normally have nothing to do with you people and your barbaric wars, but because you have split the atom, now we must intervene. The atom is, the nuclear power is not for you people. That's way beyond your ability to control. And ever since then, they've been dogging our military every single time we go out on maneuvers with their UFOs. I believe what they want, most of all, is for us to denuclearize. They're
Okay.
scared of our nuclear weapons. Why? Because they live here. if we
Right.
blow up the planet, we kill them too, right?
Yeah, there have been 2,000 nuclear detonations at least since World War II.
Testing, yeah.
Yeah, testing all different
Yeah.
ways. Surface, subsurface, aerial detonations.
And UFOs have, they just by their actions, we know that they're incredibly interested in our nukes. They're seen outside of our nuclear facilities,
Mhm.
outside of our military bases. They follow our military out on maneuvers. They're monitoring our nukes at all times, I believe. So this is an enormous expenditure of resources. I believe they're also trying to change us from within. I
Okay.
think that's what this breeding program is, this bizarre hybrid breeding program. We
Right.
think is to make us more similar so that they kind of change us spiritually and culturally from
Mhm.
within.
Yeah.
Either to allow them to reintegrate with us or some such thing.
Right, with a possible future goal of reintegration, possibly,
Right.
or just infiltration for
Mhm.
information and possible control.
Okay.
Yeah, their actions always speak louder than words. Like those
Right.
school children in Zimbabwe that a few decades ago, this spaceship landed, and these little light gray entities get out and they communicate with them telepathically. Basically, the message is always the same: take better care of your planet. You
Right.
know,
Why would they
You know?
care? They live here.
Because they live here.
But the same thing is it's the message when aliens do get their messages across. Frequently, it's stop using nukes and take better care of the planet.
Right.
So that's what they want. This is who they are. They're a branch of the human race. We think that went underground thousands of
Okay.
years ago. Another thing, the flood myths almost all end the same way. The humanity is becoming barbaric. We're devolving into cannibalism. We're almost dying out on the surface. We think they actually need us. They need regular infusions of DNA from surface dwelling people, we believe. And so they couldn't let us just die out. So we think that they came back in pantheons of 12 to rule us as gods. They showed up. That's why the Egyptians had 12 gods running
Right.
them. Why the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, had 12 gods, and
Babylonians.
the Babylonians and the Canaanites and the Sumerians. It was always these pantheons of 12, and like a family-run business. And we think they actually maybe took pity on us and came back to the surface. Some of them, but kind of to rule us, but also to help us not
Teaches
just
animal
die out. Yeah,
husbandry and astronomy and
right.
mathematics, and teaches language.
Now the
Right.
Greys, though, we think the Greys might be.
No, that's a different story.
When
Yeah.
I see a gray alien in my mind's eye, I see a human being that has lived underground for the whole 13,000 years and
Right.
has actually mutated into these gray beings. Like what
Right.
would we be like if we'd still be perfectly upright walking creatures because they evolved from us.
Right.
Um, and that's the only other creature on the planet that walks upright. Us, the aliens, Bigfoot, and nobody else. The chimps can barely make shift to stand and walk a little bit.
And bears
Yeah.
a little bit too,
But when they're frightened, they're on all fours running for the trees. They're still,
Right.
an arboreal, four-legged
For
species,
sure.
really.
Now with the Greys, we have a couple different theories, and this is partly my theory. We're not sure whether the Greys seem to be kind of like more like a servant class to the Nordics. Okay, they seem to and they are definitely telepathic, and believe me, telepathy is a lot easier than learning a language if you have the
Right.
ability telepathy. Because like when you and I think of the word, think of tree, we don't think of how to spell tree in English or any of the other 7 or 8 thousand different languages on the
Right.
planet. See a picture. So the way the brain is set up in pictures, and the way our axons and dendrites and then our neurons, how they lay down those pathways, they basically make a chemical pathway to show a tree, whether it be an oak tree or a cedar tree or whatever it may be. That's so the thing is, the way they communicate with us, it's much simpler and much more direct. That's why the original languages were pictographic and drawings. They're a step
Right.
away representationally of an object. Okay, so even like a language like English is like several steps away from telepathy, from which is a much easier way to communicate. And
And we think
Right.
telepathy is actually a human birthright.
I would agree. I think it's the same. I think it was, I mean, it's talked about in many, many, many books.
Yes, it's
Um,
atrophied in us now,
right.
but
Or
yeah,
it's,
not with
it's
them.
kind of a little bit explained in the Bible slightly, that they took that that we were given a whole bunch of different languages, right?
Scrambled our languages, yeah.
Correct. And that maybe our common language was telepathy, right?
mhm.
So,
Sitchin has a very interesting take on the Tower of Babel. Apparently, there's a Sumerian version of the Tower of Babel story, and also a Sumerian version of the expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden. It's very
right.
fascinating reading. Whether he's right or wrong, whether this planet of aliens really does swing by or not, um, and the Anunnaki really are aliens from. We believe so because one of the things that backs it up is the Steve can talk about this better. The
Oh,
the,
the
the, the
uplift.
cut and paste uplift
Oh
thing on
yeah,
our.
yeah. Jason Martell at one of his seminars I was at a couple of years ago. A lot of the brain scan stuff they've done and the PET scans and the MRIs, they've been studying a lot of what's called the neocortex, which is one of the most recent parts of the human brain. And
Right.
it looks like that, we're doing CRISPR technology now, which is kind of like, we're just like starting to touch on things like, like a sickle cell anemia and certain types of blindness. We're actually looking like we can actually reverse it or cure it, right? Well,
Right.
it looks like at a certain part of the neocortex, which is near Broca's brain, which is the part that, Carl Sagan said that's the speech center that
Mhm.
just happened to develop at a certain point in time. It looks like that there was a cut and paste job done with a certain of the four base pairs that were pasted in from not from the outside, but from the inside. It looks like our DNA was messed with. Guess when? 300,000 years ago.
Right.
Right,
Okay, so
right
it was
when
messed with.
yeah, right when Sitchin puts the Anunnaki tampering with the human race,
Right.
supposedly.
Right there.
And that's actually that's really an important time for the human development. The Homo erectus suddenly becomes Homo sapien in about 50,000 years, which is, we're talking about a million years of evolution in like
Right.
50,000 years.
Yeah.
And it's just doesn't, make sense looking at it from
Mhm.
any other way except this maybe tampering, because there's this bizarre, Homo erectus was an animal still,
Right.
drinking water like a chimp out of a stream. But
Yep.
Homo sapien, we're making houses and chairs and water cups,
Right.
and when we draw a picture of a buffalo on a wall, we understand the abstract thinking that this is a picture of a buffalo. It's not really a buffalo, but it's representational of a
Right,
buffalo.
exactly. The first development. Yeah.
Homo erectus did not have that ability.
Oh, and
Right.
also too, the other point I make too, which real quickly here, is that if you're going to have a group of people that you educate to a certain degree to build, let's say, build the pyramids, well, you have to give them blueprints, and they have to understand how to read blueprints. They have to have a plan. You can't just do everything just telepathically. You actually have to have a plan. And so
Right.
it's like, yeah, it makes so much sense that we had to develop language. They had to actually give us the ability to have language to be able to read, write, and understand. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get these power plants, which are basically the pyramids. They're
Right.
power plants and communication centers.
At least we like the Christopher Dunn theory that
Mhm.
that pyramids were actually power plants. And it makes sense that you're going into a new area to settle it, right? The
Yep.
first thing you do is you throw up a pyramid so that you have power, and then you have the rest of the settlement can be structured around it. And that's why these temple complexes look so similar from Sumeria to Egypt to Mesoamerica. They're to
Yeah.
the
Other areas too, like
other areas
Kailash,
in the
Kailash.
Mount
Yeah.
Kailash in the east,
The Thailand has
yeah,
stuff.
Thailand,
Cambodia has stuff as
Yes,
well.
right, right.
Cambodia, and a lot of these pyramid structures look like they're the same from
Yeah.
The same
Well,
base. They're usually
there's not too many different forms of pyramid. I mean,
no.
yeah,
it
I
is what
guess
it is, right?
well,
Now
yeah,
it might look a little different aesthetically, but at the
right.
end of the
And
day,
what your materials are you have to use too, so
yeah,
it might be a little
pyramid's a
different.
pyramid, right?
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, we have pyramids here in the US too. So
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
giant ones. So
Actually, the biggest.
yeah, the
I
biggest,
believe
right?
the Olmec pyramid is the largest by
Yep.
volume or something.
Yeah. And we had the Mississippians,
Yeah.
the one, yeah, that earthwork. That was huge. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I mean, what they say it was. So, but
Yeah.
We're clever little apes. If you
yeah,
give us a
right.
chance.
Absolutely. Talking monkeys, right? Um,
If you don't
so,
throw 1,000-foot high tsunamis at us, we could actually get
right.
around inventing a lot of stuff.
So for you guys, you've been at this a while, right? So
Yes.
what is coming? I mean, what's coming up for you guys? Like, what have you got going on? Where are you gonna be? Are you writing another book?
Thanks for
Or
asking.
another couple of books?
We're trying to start doing speaking engagements. We've created a PowerPoint lecture about the connection between UFOs and the Great Flood, the link between them, and we've given that presentation once, and then we're doing a second one at another event coming up in November. So we're sort of hoping to break into the speaking engagement
Yeah.
circuit, and we know our material well. If anyone wants to talk about UFOs, it's a pretty interesting subject. We'd be interested in being,
we just did
having us.
we just did an in-person documentary for
Jeremy Norrie, he's Sky
Yeah.
Island.
George's
Yeah. Him, yeah. He's going to have us in a television documentary too.
Yeah.
So there's that, and we are working on a second book, but right now I'm writing the presentation for we wanted to have one that is for
Right.
like UFO audiences, like say for UFO conventions,
Yeah.
something where you're talking to the choir, so to speak,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then something else for the general
It's
public
more
where
educational, right?
yeah,
Right.
that was
Yeah.
would it is
Yeah.
more
Because you can talk to me way different than like you could talk to my
yeah,
wife.
or like the
You know,
Lions Club, the Lions
right.
Club wants to hear about UFOs, or
Right.
whatever.
Exactly. Yes. Correct.
Yeah,
The layman version and the master version, right?
that's right, exactly.
So
And our second book will probably we've been working with some researchers that are
yeah,
doing some pretty cutting edge research into Bigfoot. Sam
right,
Kitchen
Yeah.
and a couple others.
That was one of my other questions is what kind of cross, because none of us, like, I started as a Bigfoot guy.
right.
Like,
Right.
that's Bigfoot is my entry drug, whatever you want to call it.
Your gateway drug.
The gateway drug, right? That was Sasquatch. So
So Sasquatch, we think, is our cousins, as we call them. They have no qualms about using genetic manipulation to
right,
create creatures they need. And so we think that they created Bigfoot and use Bigfoots as sentries to guard the entrances to their underground cities. That's why Bigfoots are never captured. That's why even when they're shot, they're somehow vanished, like they're collected by
right,
their
yeah,
underground alien handler,
There is a
we
possibility, the
think.
rumor about, when we had the big forest fires in California a couple of years
uh-huh,
ago, that one got burned and was collected by
The government grabbed it.
the government grabbed it.
okay,
We don't know. We can't confirm that one way or the other, but
Right.
it does appear that either Australopithecus robustus or Gigantopithecus
yep.
were the basis for
The
Original.
base, right? And
Yeah.
that's a good point. I was
And then they
wondering.
created it to be a fully upright walking creature like us. So we
Yep.
think maybe they mixed, us in there too. They have no qualms about doing that. That's what I think reptilians are. Reptilians and grays have been spotted working together, and
Mm,
Nordics and grays have been spotted on the same ships. We're not talking about different species coming from different star systems, all different from all different locations. We're talking about a species working. One is kind of like in charge. We think the Nordics are in charge because the Nordics were the ones that met with Byrd, and later we believe with Eisenhower.
okay.
And we think that the Greys are possibly they use them as a worker race and have possibly genetically modified them to be like that because
Right.
they're described as automatons, um,
Yep.
completely emotionless. No matter how much terror they inspire in their victims, they don't care either way, one way or another. And they're always very goal driven. They never stop wondering, what are we doing next? I don't know. It's almost
Y-
like they're
Automatons,
operating a
right?
program of some kind. They're
Yeah.
carrying out a program of some
First
kind.
time I ever heard that, I think it was L.A. Marzulli, um, had
Hmm.
said, he's got some too, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I love him.
there's a lot of cross pollination though here.
Yeah, he's on Instagram, and I read his stuff a lot. Goes by a lot.
Yeah. So, and some of his, he had one woman, an abduction thing that was part of the breeding program.
Right.
But it's very good if you haven't listened or seen what I'm talking about. I
you
can't
know
remember. I can't
yeah
remember her name off the top of my head, but
yeah I was at a one of these quote unquote experiencer groups where, let's say, 40 or 50 people get together kind of in a circle and talk about their experiences, and you can kind of tell, at least I can, because I still have a lot of my sensitivities, where I can kind of tell when a person is just full of it, or
oh,
whether they actually have had a real they've had a
you're
real
you
experience.
are looking for attention here,
Yes.
folks.
Yeah, there's some that are just ridiculous,
I
but
hear a lot of stuff that too, like, and you can tell it because they're talking outside the model.
Right.
UFOs
Like
are silent.
outlandish stuff, right?
Yeah,
Just like,
yeah,
yeah, or sometimes crazy, very
yeah.
outlandish.
Ashtar told me, is it okay to come
Right.
in now? It's like,
right.
But like in our book, we tried
true
to
story.
focus mostly on, at least the beginning, we focused mostly on mass sightings.
Okay.
Because with one person,
Yeah, right.
they could be mistaken, they could be crazy, they could be
A lot
lying.
of right.
Um,
Exactly.
but when 300 people call the cops and say a UFO just flew through my backyard, then it's like,
Yep.
okay, well, that probably is a real thing then.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? What's
Oh
the
yes,
best place for people? Like, if people want to book you to
yeah. Our
present,
Instagram
Instagram.
page, yeah, it's at leslie.shaw.author, and Leslie is the Leslie spelling, and our all our connection are in our. They can DM us, and also our email is there. So yeah, and we'd love to hear experiencers information too. Like a lot of times people share their experiences with us, and I
Right.
really appreciate
I
it.
prefer to actually meet with them myself to get a read on
Oh,
people if I
because so
can.
you can smell them out.
Yeah,
See
I
if they're
wasn't
see if
I
they're
wasn't
legit or not,
yeah,
right?
I wasn't an acupuncturist and a Tai Chi teacher for nothing, and I come from a
Right.
family of of psychics. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I know, and I did my military duty for 6 years. So I got a little bit of a blend of
Yeah,
the
right.
white.
I get it.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I can I have a little I'm a Reiki guy. So
Ah,
There you go.
I a Reiki practitioner. I say Reiki guy, but Reiki practitioner.
cool.
And also I have the ability to see auras.
Mhm.
Wow.
Which happened after I drowned. So uh,
Wow.
that's a whole story on itself.
I've got one.
I've never even told on this podcast, but we'll get there.
Really? Oh, okay.
I've got one of those myself.
Yeah, he almost drowned one time too.
Um,
I mean, you think he was saved by old Glegley again,
no, and
You think,
that is a story for another episode, right?
yeah,
That's right.
indeed.
That's right.
So guys, I really appreciate you coming on. I got to cut it because I think our
Okay.
recording time is gonna run out
Yeah.
actually.
Yes. It's
Okay.
almost an hour. Yeah.
We
But
also have a website, whotheyarebook.com. And then
And
now I'm
who
done.
they are book.
book is available on Amazon.
Amazon.
But it's actually who they are book.com.
Yes.
As far as the
website.
right?
Website.
Yeah.
See, I'll put all this stuff in the show notes as well.
Okay.
So that
Thank
it'll
you.
get on there. Trying to think, is there anything else? Any other
I
stuff
think
that,
it was good. I think.
No, we enjoyed it. We do it again maybe sometime.
yeah,
Thank
for
you so
sure.
much for having us. I really
No,
appreciate
absolutely. It was I just love getting other people's takes and theories on some of this stuff, because it's like you look at where a lot of this comes from, and that's why I brought up Sitchin, because I know that material. But I hear like Graham Hancock come in there a little bit. There's different guys. A lot of people have a lot of theories.
Yeah, we've read him
Right.
too, of course.
I've read Hancock's too. And
Yeah,
Graham.
that last book that he had, the America, where he talked about before America, I think was the name of it. That was a great book. I don't know if you've read it or not.
I have not gotten
No,
around
we
to that
haven't
one yet.
read that
no.
one yet.
Hold on, let me make sure. Yeah, it's Graham Hancock's newest book. It's kind of talks a lot about the younger Dryas.
We just bought
Imminent.
Luis Elizondo's new book, Imminent.
It hasn't.
Imminent.
It's imminently going to arrive.
Imminent,
Yeah.
right.
We have a big stack of reading material just to keep up with this the
Dolan's
the
work
phenomenon.
and Primo's work. Yeah. It's fun.
I mean, all I do is research. I get it.
I know.
That's all that I do. I love it, so I can't help it. So, all right, guys. I know you're sweating. Do you have air conditioning to go hide in now or not?
Yeah.
We do.
All right, so go get in the air.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys coming on, and we will. I'll put everything in the show notes, and then I'll let you know when I release it.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
And I'll smear it all over our social media.
Awesome.
That's right.
All right, guys. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and go get cold.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.